Hello, everyone. Welcome to this latest edition of Skyscraper. My name is David Rottblatt. I'm the Business Development Director for EMBRAERX, and it's my privilege and honor to share a little bit with you today about EMBRAERX, the projects that we're working on, as well as the new company that we just recently announced, EVE, Urban Air Mobility, and then some thoughts about the potential for EVE, Skyscraper of our own vehicles in Latin America. So with that in mind, once again, my name is David Rothblatt, and today we'll be beginning with a brief overview of EMBRAERX. If you have any questions about some of the material that has been presented today during this recorded presentation, please feel free to get in touch with Felipe Varon, and I'll be happy to answer any of those questions as they come in via email, LinkedIn, or otherwise. So again, thank you very much, and we'll begin with the presentation. I'll share my screen now. Just give me one moment. So most of you are familiar with EMBRAERX as the disruptive innovation arm. But for those that aren't, we're a new business unit that was created about 3 years ago with the mission and the objective of identifying new disruptive technologies, businesses, both asset light and asset heavy products, and any type of solution that we think the future of transportation will need to help us evolve towards that next generation of travel. For those that aren't as familiar with Embraer, we are most well known as an aircraft manufacturer in the executive, defense, and commercial airline space. These are an example of some of our aircraft that we have manufactured over the last few decades, but more importantly, we are a very trusted brand in the 150-seat segment and less. And so you've probably flown in our aircraft all around the world, and we've manufactured and certified almost one aircraft per year for the last 2 decades between these different business units. So the DNA that comes to EMBRAERX from these projects is strong, and we look forward to continuing that heritage of excellence in aircraft manufacturing in the future projects that we will soon talk about. So this is the background of Embraer. And then when EMBRAERX was created again, we had this mandate and this mission of developing new disruptive solutions, technologies, platform businesses, et cetera, for the next generation of transportation. And with that in mind, we really started to focus on this new and exciting concept called urban air mobility. And with that in mind, we knew that as an aircraft manufacturer, there's so much that is a part of that value chain to creating a very robust urban air mobility industry that we took an ecosystem partnership perspective to really start to put the pieces together. And so I'll share 3 of those projects with you today that helps to position EMBRAERX, which will now be brought into our new company, EVE, Urban Air Mobility Solutions, as that ecosystem-wide player. To begin with, one of those projects is our electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, which we'll talk about in a second. The second is our aircraft services business, most notably our project Beacon, which is a maintenance-based platform that we'll talk about soon. And then finally, our urban air traffic management solution, which is what I'll spend the bulk of our presentation on today. Urban air traffic management is a new paradigm of air traffic control that is targeted towards enabling the safe scalability of the urban air mobility industry. In essence, what we seek to build is a more favorable operating environment for urban air mobility to be able to grow without the type of procedural barriers that are inhibiting the more organic growth of this industry in some of the more mature air taxi markets that are already operational today. So with that in mind, we'll just briefly touch on our eVTOL, and my colleague Andre Stein in a separate session will record a more detailed examination of this exciting project. But in essence, our electric vertical takeoff and land aircraft is designed to be fully autonomous from the beginning, but will begin with piloted flights. The configuration will likely be a 4+1 configuration, meaning we'll have 4 passengers plus 1 pilot. And these are some of the examples of the design drivers that we have incorporated into the process of how we wanted to really offer a very complete product that really catered to the user experience, that was simple and intuitive for the operator and the passenger, and was inclusive of everybody. We've really gone to great lengths to make sure that this could be handicap accessible, as well as also safe for egress and ingress. You'll note the booms and the rotors are well above the height of even the average tallest adult, for example, that you'll see getting in and out of some of these aircraft. And of course, it's community friendly. There's two very strong value propositions that revolve around the electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. One, because it is electric, it is much quieter. And our hope is that the quieter that these aircraft are, the more likely communities will be to want to adopt these aircraft into local communities. The second is, again, because it's electric, the cost savings of operating and maintaining electric vehicles will be passed to the consumer, thereby ultimately affording a more accessible price point to a much larger segment of the population, again, thereby increasing accessibility for more and more people. The electric vertical takeoff and land aircraft is really a continuation, in my view, of a very strong and rich story of urban air mobility that began really as far back as the 1940s and 50s with the launch of Los Angeles Airways and New York Airways. Since then, we have learned to adopt and embrace the shared economy business model, where we share the operational cost of that flight with other passengers that share our origin and destination, but still using conventional technology, conventional helicopters. Now, today, in this next chapter of the story of urban air mobility, we see the maturation of battery technology being ready for aviation grade. And now that we have such rich and concentrated energy in these battery cells, we can now offer an even greener and more community-friendly product with electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. So more on that to come in a separate presentation. The second exciting project from EMBRAERX is called Project Beacon, which is found in the aircraft services segment. Project Beacon is essentially a maintenance-based platform that is designed to reduce the amount of time aircraft are grounded for maintenance or other reasons. And so by very quickly identifying the closest mechanic and part that is needed to return that aircraft to service, our Project Beacon really aims to be a wonderful support tool to operators and customers of our eVTOL aircraft and other aircraft all around the world. Finally, our urban air traffic management project, which was a very deep collaboration between EMBRAERX and atech, our wholly owned air traffic management subsidiary that we've partnered with to develop this initiative, as well as in partnership and collaboration with L3Harris Technologies. And the idea here is, again, referencing that idea of greater community accessibility of eVTOL aircraft as that price point continues to drop and more people become excited and can afford this as a transportation option. The growth of eVTOL aircraft will require a new and more scalable form of air traffic management technology. And that's why we feel we need something called urban air traffic management, which again is what we've developed for the last 3 years and are continuing to develop. As a commercial pilot and helicopter pilot myself, I can attest to the fact that airspace around the world is becoming increasingly congested, and the status quo of using voice-based communication to communicate between air traffic control and piloted aircraft is becoming stretched to the almost inability of air traffic controllers to keep up with demand. In some of the busiest airspace that I've flown into, controllers barely have a time to break in between instructions and communications between aircraft and themselves. And so if we're already at the physical limit of voice-based communication to support piloted passenger carrying aircraft today, that is one reason why we felt we needed to develop something new for the urban air mobility industry. Similarly, unmanned traffic management, or UTM, shows incredible promise, and we're really very excited about what that has to offer for the future of autonomous flight. However, today, unmanned traffic management is really only used for drones, and there isn't yet any type of legislation that would empower a regulator to regulate such an environment where UTM technology could be used for piloted passenger carrying flight, at least to the extent that UTM would be responsible for the movements of that aircraft the same way that UTM is responsible in many ways for beyond visual line of sight operation and some within visual line of sight operation for drones today. So if we can't yet use technologies like UTM, and we don't exactly know when that will be ready, because of course that varies country by country depending on the standards of each country's regulator, and our ability to use voice-based communication is becoming increasingly reduced. We're only left with urban air traffic management that we believe is the viable solution to, again, create a new paradigm of air traffic management that will allow this industry to grow safely. So what we believe urban air traffic management ought to consist of, and you can find more of this in our white paper, flightplan2030.com, and in some of the collaborations that we've been working on with other countries, which will become available in a few weeks' time, is a combination of conventional air traffic control software and capabilities, which we believe at the launch of urban air mobility operations, that should suffice for the limited types of eVTOL aircraft that will be flying. And its ability to interact with data services and some forms of UTM. These are the driving virtues or the pillars of what we think urban air traffic management ought to be able to provide. It should be capable of serving a broad spectrum of aircraft, really any aircraft that are offering air taxi operations today, whether it's a conventional helicopter like a Bell 206, a Robinson 44, or the most advanced version of an eVTOL aircraft that is flying today in some countries already. There is such a broad spectrum of capabilities that these aircraft have. Similarly to the Ford Trimotor, sharing the same airspace as the Airbus A380, two very different types of aircraft, but air traffic control still nonetheless needs to be able to cater to all aircraft that are eligible to enter controlled airspace, and therefore are eligible to have the services provided by air traffic control or any type of air traffic management system. And therefore, we believe urban air traffic management ought to be able to serve a broad spectrum of aircraft. It also should be able to provide equitable access to airspace for all. Airspace cannot be commoditized or bought or owned by any particular operator or user. It really belongs to everyone who are properly equipped to enter that airspace. And lastly, urban air traffic management, our urban air traffic management solution really will be designed to evolve from voice-based communication, where we're at today, to more autonomous forms of data exchange and interaction as the technology proves it is more and more safe and reliable. And so with that in mind, I'm happy to share with you a few example services of how we envision the future of urban air traffic management being used in a practical perspective. If we design airspace corridors or dedicated routes, like the VFR corridor and the Hudson River, for example, these are very dedicated airspace use areas, for example, that VFR aircraft can use to traverse one part of the city to the next without entering controlled airspace. But sometimes, because that is a VFR corridor and you have to follow VFR rules, perhaps in a city environment like this, for example, you may need to circumnavigate some micro-weather climates or some clouds in order to maintain VFR. And so we are proposing the ability to have things like dynamic airspace management, where if one route is closed, another one could open that is perhaps parallel or still helps you get to your destination as efficiently and as direct as possible. Another is services like conformance monitoring, or again, different forms of dynamic airspace management, where in a UTM system or a UATM system, we would be able to provide alternate guidance for the operator of that aircraft to still be able to get to their destination without entering closed airspace due to fire, police activity, emergencies, or any other reason why that airspace ought to be closed. Here is an example of how we envision the future evolving. At some point over time, there will be more and more aircraft entering service. As these piloted aircraft continue to evolve in their capabilities, so will air traffic control and air traffic management solutions as well. They will continue to evolve. Ultimately, we share the belief with others that we're evolving from an air traffic control environment to an air traffic management environment, in the sense that controllers will soon be overseeing a network of technology and service providers working with each other, and controllers will be overseeing that network. But as these air traffic control solutions evolve towards more and more autonomous capabilities, at some point we will need to remove the pilot, because perhaps at that point the autonomous technology will be as safe and hopefully safer than a pilot operating that vehicle. And so when that pilot is removed, that's when we think this industry will really start to scale. Autonomous aircraft will continue to grow in ubiquity as that price point continues to drop, and then autonomous aircraft will continue to dominate low-level, dense urban environments in order to provide greater service and safer service as that technology proves that it's ready. Again, another reason why we need a new form of air traffic management, which we propose is called urban air traffic management. Finally, I want to come back to one of our partners, atech, who we have been very excited to collaborate with over these last several years. atech is a wholly owned subsidiary of Embraer, and they are the current provider of the complete suite of air traffic control software that the Brazilian Air Force uses to control Brazilian airspace. That includes over 22 million square kilometers of airspace throughout Brazil and Brazil's coastline. And that Embraer know-how through our subsidiary atech is in part what empowers the urban air traffic management team to provide trusted operational capability and know-how for the urban air mobility industry. And it's not just the conventional air traffic control technology that we look forward to leveraging from our partner and subsidiary of Embraer, which is atech, but also their know-how in specifically co-creating the routes and the technology that has allowed Sao Paulo, which is the world's largest air taxi market, to sustain as many as 1,200 air taxi operations each day. There's a lot that we can learn from what atech has co-created with the Brazilian Air Force to allow for such voluminous operations in cities like Sao Paulo. And we very much plan on taking all that expertise and knowledge that as a company we've gained by helping to create that environment that we see today in Sao Paulo, and bringing that to other countries, other markets, other cities that would like to position themselves to be early adopters of the urban air mobility industry. And so with that in mind, the value proposition of the urban air traffic management software is one that really seeks to be as safe, if not safer, to reduce the controller workload that conventional air traffic controllers are seeing today. It seeks to create a more favorable and a more scalable operating environment for the urban air mobility industry to grow. And these here are the 6 core services that we believe will be necessary in order to attain some of those objectives. Each of these services are capabilities and requirements that we believe ought to be adopted by any city that is positioning themselves to, again, be an early adopter of the urban air mobility industry. Some of these are well known, others are not. But through our work with different air navigation service providers, regulators, airport authorities around the world, we have continued to receive excellent validation that this is the right direction for us to go in. And so therefore, I'm very happy to report that in a few weeks from the time of this recording, some very exciting announcements will be made about new collaborations and developments that EMBRAERX has engaged with in terms of proposing new concepts of operations for the world to consider when thinking about how to grow their local air taxi industry, and really to create that scalable and safe operating environment. One of these collaborations are just wrapping up, and another is just beginning. And in both cases, we're doing this really as a team effort, and we think that that is really what's necessary in order to help this industry grow. Industry will make this possible, but it really comes down to the work that we can do with communities and with other industry leaders to make sure that this is really feasible and desirable. And it's very much the position of the EMBRAERX team and now the EVE Urban Air Mobility team, the first spinoff of EMBRAERX, to take that community-centric approach and co-create everything that we do and that we design, so that we're always working with the customer and the user in mind. So with that in mind, I'll stop this presentation and transition to another. And I'll only spend maybe 1 or 2 minutes on a new and exciting announcement, which again is EVE Urban Air Mobility Solutions, which you can see here. If you plan on going to eveairmobility.com, you can find our newest website, which is right here. And you can learn a little bit more about the 3 pillars of our team. One, we're focused on our electric vertical takeoff and land aircraft. Second is our urban air traffic management solution, which I shared with you. And then finally, our services and support capabilities, which has a lot more exciting news to come. Finally, this is the leadership team of Eve. I'm joined and very privileged to be working with Andre Stein, the former head of strategy of EMBRAERX, who is now the CEO, Luis Valentini, who leads the engineering effort behind the development of our electric vertical takeoff and land aircraft, who is our CTO, Chris Thornsberry, our VP of Finance, who has been doing an excellent job with Embraer's investor relations, and Daniel Teixeira, who is our program management lead. So EMBRAERX and Eve, Urban Air Mobility Solutions, both plan on being very active partners in the development of the urban air mobility industry and to partner with local communities, airport authorities, regulators, air navigation service providers, and most importantly, the individual, you, who we hope will one day be a passenger and a customer of exciting services like these. And that's exactly why we're so thrilled to be partnering with Skyscraper and Verdon Vehicles, precisely because this organization is doing what needs to be done, which is reaching out and developing new markets, helping to educate people about the value of what urban air mobility has to offer. And we very much plan on taking these next steps together. What can we learn together? How can we continue the conversation by bringing what we've talked about today to your home, to your local community leader, and maybe even to propose some city council meetings where industry members like myself and Eve Urban Air Mobility Solutions can come and present more about what we're capable of doing, and to really start having more advanced conversations about the value that this poses for countries like Colombia, cities like Medellin, Bogota, and how other countries are already starting to take steps, like what Brazil has been doing already with Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and of course, cities that are really focused on green innovations like Curitiba, for example. So again, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is David Rottblatt. I'm the Business Development Director of EMBRAERX and the appointed Vice President of Business Development for Eve Urban Air Mobility Solutions. I'd be very happy to answer any questions that you have. And thank you again to Skyscraper and Verdon Vehicles for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you.